Mishael. So three guys. And anybody who has to do these readings, they kind of shudder. They go, oh boy, it's from the book of Daniel, I've got to read these three names: Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Those are their Hebrew names. Remember the Babylonian names? The Babylonian names were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So try saying that as fast as you can 3 times. But it's the same person. It's the same person. This is a story of that first reading that circulated for a long time. It was these 3 guys were Azariah, who we heard from today, were friends of Daniel, and they were, of course, during the captivity, and they were imprisoned and thrown into this furnace. And they were so brave. They were so brave. They persisted in prayer. Everything they did, even though they were in a situation of terrible, terrible persecution and oppression, they gave praise to God. And that's what happens here with Azariah. He's still saying to God, perhaps we deserve this, Lord, but we are your servants. We will do what we can. We will persevere. And as I said, this prayer and the bravery, the courageousness of these 3 young people was the stuff of legend, and it circulated around for many, many years to bolster the faith of people, and especially, 1,500 years later, or 500 years later, when the church was persecuted, Jesus Christ and his followers were persecuted, they would refer back to this reading. And here we are, 2,500 years later, looking at these 3 men. And wow, look how they persevered, and they continue to be God's children in the midst of terrible, terrible persecution. So, great lesson that we have today. But also, I was saying that sometimes we shudder when we read these readings, and you have to say it out loud. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and the Old Testament writer never refers to them as they, the 3 guys. They. No, he always insists on saying all 3 names. How does he do that? Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. The reason he does that is because of the meaning of the name. And I'm always doing that. I always like to look at the etymological etiology of each name. What does it mean? Hananiah, Shadrach, it means God is gracious. Mishael, Meshach, it's Michael, like Michael McDonald. It means who is like God. And Abednego, or Azariah, the guy who we heard today, his name means helped by God. So these names are repeated over and over and over. Even the first century Jews heard this during the time of Christ. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. They're not just hearing the names; they're hearing their meanings. And God is gracious. Well, who is God gracious to? He's gracious to you. His grace is with you. Who is like God? You are. You're like God. Anybody hearing these words? You're like God. And who is helped by God? My dad, Mishael. Who is helped by God? You are. You're helped by God. And so here we are, like I said, 2,500 years later, going through a crazy time sometimes. All kinds of problems and worries and anxieties that beset us. And yet we're reminded, God's grace is with you. You are like God. And you are helped by God. Don't ever forget it. Don't ever forget it. Those are great words to hear today. And then we hear the words of the gospel. Very, very powerful. How often are we to forgive each other? All the time. And I guess, most of us do ask that question. Gosh, can I really forgive another person? Yeah, we do what we can. We do what we can. But over in Rome, I was eavesdropping on the Pope. You know what the Pope said about today's readings? He says, yeah, we do ask ourselves that questions about whether or not we can forgive other people. But you ask yourself this question: can you forgive yourself? Can you forgive yourself? Because you people, you're just so wonderful. I know so many of you. You're great people, but you're your own worst enemy. We're our own worst enemy, because there's always one thing that we look back in our past and go, oh man, I really regret doing that one. Boy, I really messed up that. And a lot of you good people will go to confession, and sometimes you confess sins that you did a long time ago. Did you confess it already? Well, yeah, I did. Well, why do you keep confessing it? Because you just feel so bad about it. You gotta forgive yourself. You gotta forgive yourself. Stop hanging on to things that you did a long time ago. I mean, you gotta make up for it. You gotta make a living amends now. You gotta go out and live your life. If you did something wrong, you did something bad, trust in God's forgiveness and go on. So yeah, we struggle with forgiving each other, but a lot of times we're our own worst enemy. We always hang on to one thing that we really, really regret, we're really embarrassed about, we're really ashamed of, and we just beat ourselves up. Stop doing that. You learn how to forgive yourself too. Oh, great lessons that we have here today. We learn to persist in prayer, persist in good works, like Azariah and the 3 young men. We forgive others as best we can. We have to struggle with that. Also, we learn how to forgive ourselves. We have to forgive ourselves. So let's pray for that today. There are a lot of people that are out there that live in guilt, and a lot of people that are right on the brink of giving up. May they have God's grace and assistance and persistence. And once more, we celebrate this Mass, and especially this wonderful Eucharist, in the presence of God, in the presence of Jesus, really touch our lives, teach us, and help us to forgive each other and forgive ourselves. Let's stand up.